Should
There you
work.
go. So that should be working, right? Yeah, it's recording. Okay, Reena, I'm so excited. As I said, this is an opportunity for me to make friends. Okay, I'm on a mission to connect with like-minded, heart-minded individuals who are on this path to exploring this fantastic adventure called life. You know, we all come from somewhere, we all have a story, and our stories matter. And in our stories, we find hope, we find inspiration, we find motivation, we find ourselves sometimes, you know. And I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I became a fan because I became aware of who you are actually, because you're connected to my very dear friend Rosie Rose. And you did a great job with interviewing her about her father and the whole topic of forgiveness. And basically, that's how I entered your rabbit hole. But Reena, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Aw, well, first off, I just want to say it means the world to me that you reached out and that my interview with Rosie spoke to you. And I love people that see the importance of sharing their story and gaining wisdom from other people's experience. That's a big part of who I am. Is the reason that I started this creative endeavor was to catch up with people that have influenced my life and that I've kept in touch with, and some of the unique paths that I've taken. In the beginning of creating a podcast, I was like, wow, I did work in reality TV for on and off half of my career, and I've kept in touch with Jerry Springer's publicist and the nannies from Nanny 911 and some of the reality stars from Kill Reality and Survivor, and just like the beginning of reality television in general. Like when I graduated college, it was right before the internet took storm. I had a
All right.
beeper when I worked at Jerry Springer. We booked,
You worked at Jerry Springer.
yes, that was my first job. And even how we booked those stories were people calling
Are
into
they
the
real
show.
stories then? Are they real?
A lot of them.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, and so it was people calling into the show, people wanting to tell their stories, people wanting validation, people feeling like Jerry could add 2 cents to their life. And honestly, my podcast kind of modeled that. I was like, I want to talk to everyday people. I want to talk to people that have a story to share, and I wanna share that with my dad, who's my number 1 fan and my biggest supporter, and see what he has to say about some of these people that I'm talking to. I
Yeah.
know he can weigh in with something witty, and so that's how my podcast began, was just like, "Let me have all of these conversations, share that with my dad, and see how that can change our lives," and it really has.
I've loved the people that you've interviewed, the stories that you've told, the questions that you're able to ask, because some of them are really challenging, just to get to know the person behind the person. You know, there's several layers as coaches, as we know, we go deep. So you're really good at asking great questions that connects the viewer to the person in front of you, as well as keep the conversation going. And what I appreciate about your podcast is, like most of us, when we hang up, we might share, oh, I just did this great interview with Reena, Dad. Oh, she was so much fun and this and that. But to bring your father's comments and thoughts and feedback and insights and wisdom, because your dad has loads and he'll take it to different levels that maybe your show didn't have time for, like genius. I really love it. And I tell you why I love it even more so. So before there was Google in my life, there was Dad. This is what I wrote in his tribute. My father passed away 2 years ago. My dad was my go-to for everything. My dad was literally a walking encyclopedia. He knew everything about every country, facts, fun things. You know, he'd met people from all over the world. He was an army officer, so he traveled a lot with his career. And he was just a generally interesting, funny guy. And I love that you have that connection with your dad. And I love that you have that recording with your dad, because it's also, for you now, it's a way of creating a unique podcast. But years to come, you'll realize that, wow, my dad is alive. You can, like, pictures are static. But what's really precious for me now is to play audio tapes of hearing my dad's voice, When people pass,
Yeah.
we have loads of pictures, but we don't have a lot of audio to go and listen to his voice. And I have a few on my phone just by chance. And I treasure those, and I sit with those, and I grieve with those. And in those moments, my father is alive, and the love is alive. So I just want to let you know how precious that is, that the preciousness is not even conscious to you right now, but in years to come, you'll see how incredible it is to have him part of your life story, your journey, what you're learning about people and life. Okay, so tell us about your dad. Like, where are your parents from?
My parents actually were born in America. My dad grew up on the East Coast. His parents raised him in New York, and then they moved to Boston, and then they moved to Kentucky where my mom was. My mom is like a Jew from Kentucky, which is a thing. People remember that about me. They're like, there's Jews in Kentucky? Yes, not many, but I know them all. They're either
Right.
related or I know them.
Small
Um,
community.
yes, actually, my mom's parents, my mom's mom is from Indiana, and yeah, my grandfather. I grew up with all of my grandparents in
Oh,
Kentucky, like all four of my grandparents. Three out of the four of my grandparents are still alive. So that actually has been a big part of my story and influence, and really a big part of how I was raised. I feel extremely fortunate. I don't think I realized how lucky I was growing up, having four grandparents and knowing like five of my great grandparents, but that's Kentucky living. My mom had me at 19, and her mom had her early, and her mom had her early. So when I was born, it was five generations.
oh, wow.
Five generations. There's a picture of that. And I think something that was attractive to my dad about my mom was that she had a large family. My dad did not have a large family. A lot of his family was wiped out in the Holocaust.
Mm.
And it was something that was important to his mom. His
Mhm.
mom actually had six pregnancies like me and only had four children. She lost two babies. I actually had two miscarriages as well. Hers were, unfortunately, one was a stillborn and one passed away a couple months after being born. But family was something that was really important to my dad's mom. And his mom and I, since I was her first granddaughter, we still, thank God she's 95 years old, we still have a very special relationship. I would spend every weekend at their house probably until about fifth grade. They had a special mattress on the floor for me in their room.
Wow.
And I watched my dad and his parents have a family run business for 40 plus years. So entrepreneurship was definitely in my blood. And I remember my grandmother being up at like 6 in the morning and typing manually time cards of like 200 employees. She
Oh,
was
my
such a
goodness.
diligent worker, and she didn't even have a college degree, but my my dad and his parents are super scrappy. You know, they may not know how to make like a beautiful document. Even now, like my dad does some consulting work, and he's got the gift of gab. He's got a charm about him. He can sell. He's really good at managing relationships, but as far as making documents beautiful, he sends them to me and he's like, "Hey, can you digitize this?" So like he's a very like he'll write it all out by hand and then he'll send it to me and I'm like, "I got you."
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so fortunate, your background there. As a Ghanaian, I'm originally from Ghana. I was born and raised in Ghana till I was 10 years old. So my parents moved to England when I was 10. And I'm also from a large family. And I'm from a community where we believe it takes a village to raise a child, right? It takes the whole village. Grandparents have a massive role to play, aunties, everybody in the community has a role to play. And you are so lucky to have all your grandparents, so the history line, present to get to know them intimately, not only hear about their stories or their time on earth, but really allow them to make an impression on you. And then you talked about your dad and all the characteristics that he has from your mom. What are some of the subconscious identity that you carry from your family line that is passed on generationally? Since you were fortunate to have all living grandparents and you met them all.
What's really interesting is that even though I have met them all, and even though, I have a lot of memories of them coming to my singing performances or coming to all of my school functions, my mom's family is very private. They don't want to share. And what's interesting too in this day and age is like people are sharing everything on the internet. Like some people don't want to share. So, you know, then you ask yourself, is it my story to share? Even though having them in my life has impacted and influenced my life, there are parts of my story that I can't share because there are people in my family that aren't comfortable with sharing in the way that I do. So that's something. I actually have two very opposite sides of my family. My dad's side of the family, they're oversharers. He talks to everybody on the block. That's totally me. Like he wears his heart on his sleeve. And I believe if you share like that, then people will share with you like that. But my mom's side of the family, they cover up trauma. They cover up hardship. My mom's been through breast cancer and I could barely hug her through it. She wants to go through it on her own and everything's fine and I'll do what the doctor tells me. And if I were going through that, I'd be like, help! You know what I mean? Everyone, I need a, who do you know
Rescue
that's been
me.
through this?
Yeah. It's
So
so interesting how you have both identity. So far on your journey, is there any part of you that's not connected to other parents or family members that you're trying to connect with that you won't share?
that is a fantastic question. I mean, I went and explored away from my family for years. You know, what's interesting is, I was born and raised in Kentucky. Like I literally lived there my entire life. And then I went away to college for a couple years. I got a singing scholarship to my first school in Charleston, West Virginia. I was like the only Jew at the whole college, like the only Jewish girl. And then I think the next year a guy came and then I was just like, okay, this is a very small school, and my high school was like a lot more rigorous of a program. So I ended up transferring to Purdue University, which then I got a job in radio and it lit something in me. Like I loved that format. I loved the creativity of being able to take news stories and edit them and kind of make it my own version of the story.
Yes.
And so I thought I wanted to work in radio. I actually went from working at a radio station, an NPR station for 2 years, to getting an interview at WGN in Chicago. And I didn't get it, but I got the interview. And then while I was there interviewing for that job, I saw a flyer in the same courtyard that Jerry Springer was looking for interns.
Oh,
So that is how I ended up walking across to NBC Tower and starting there 2 weeks later.
oh my God. Go, Jerry. Go, Jerry.
Yes, Jerry. And
Yeah.
I would say that that definitely changed, I feel like, kind of who I was, because then I like really wanted to work in entertainment. I really wanted to prove myself. I was like this small town girl who could shine. And, I went through a couple years of bullying when I was in middle school. I went to like private school. I was very fortunate, like kindergarten through fifth grade, but there was only one girl in my class for 6 years. And I like really wanted kind of more friends. And it was like a boy heavy year where there was like, I think 15 guys and like one girl. And so after 6 years of only having one friend, I begged my parents to go to public school. And then when they sent me to public school, it was so drastically different from my sheltered environment that I was in. And very eye opening to say the least. So was Springer for that matter. Um, but yeah, some of those things that I saw and experienced were not how I was raised, but I was open to it. I mean, I wanted to learn about it.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to kind of forge my own path. Like, what was I raised with? What do they believe? What do I believe? What do I want to keep? What do I want to throw away? I think we all kind of go through a process of that.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my God. So many things so many things I want to ask you about that. And I'm going to try and remember. So, as I said, I was born and raised in Ghana. I moved over to England when I was 10 years old, and my parents moved to a community where there were no people looking like us, right?
Mm,
So it's predominant. Well, now it's very multicultural and mixed, but let's say 40 years ago, We were the only Black people in the community. And I remembered what that felt like. Not so much me not handling being the only Black person in my community. However, is the reaction that people had to me, you know,
Mm.
and the questions and almost making me feel like I didn't belong. What did you learn during your period of being the only Jewish girl in your school? And what did that open up inside of you?
That is such a great question. I never felt white. I learned that. And I never felt white in Kentucky either. And I felt like it was a very black and white place to grow up. So people were constantly asking me, like, what are you? And I was like, what do you mean? What am I? It's like such an offensive question. It's funny, in college, I had a girlfriend and her mom was Mexican and her dad was German. And we bonded instantly. Like, she was like, oh, yeah, people ask me that all the time. I was like, oh, awesome. Well, we can, like figure out our answer to that together. Um,
You never felt white. Isn't being are Jewish people not considered white?
that is such a great question.
Because you
I,
are for
I
me.
I would say that being Jewish is a culture. Some
Yeah.
people say being Jewish is a religion, but it's also a people. And there are people that are Jewish and Asian, Jewish and Jamaican, Jewish and redhead. Like there really isn't a Jewish look, or I don't know. People like
So when you're
apparently
going
thought
through
I
the
looked
airport
Jewish,
and
but
you have to tick one of those things, like I hate those cards anyway, but you have to tick one. And if there isn't Jewish there, black, white, Asian,
other.
you tick other?
No, I mean, I have checked white,
Mhm.
but I have never felt white because other people have always come up to me and they're like, "What are you?" Like in many places that I've lived. And what's interesting is when I moved to LA, it was like the first place I moved where I was like, "Oh, my people." There's so many Jewish people here because when I lived in Kentucky, I went to public school and a lot of my friends weren't Jewish. And then moved to West Virginia and I was an only, and moved to Indiana and there weren't so many there either. And then moved to Chicago, some, but I wasn't religious. I was more like culturally Jewish and kind of like Jewish because I was born into it.
Hmm.
So I wasn't observant. And then I moved to LA and people started inviting me over for Passover and for, Shabbat dinners. I was like, "Oh, wow, this is kind of interesting. Let me learn more about that." I kind of like how you guys are like celebrating being Jewish. I was never proud of that growing up, you know? And so I went on this whole like spiritual exploration of like, what does being Jewish mean? Why does it matter? And you know why it matters? Because I was born into that. I am that. Like, I can't shake that no matter how hard I try to cover that up and assimilate or, you know, fit into. What's interesting is in college, I feel like Black people actually embraced me more because I was another.
Yeah, we kind of collect every other, like every other belongs. That's really interesting. When I was younger at school, one of my best friends, her name is Suzanne Epstein, she was Jewish. And for me, as an African girl, her coloring meant she was white for me. But she's like, no, 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 I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. She was always, it wasn't just the religion, it wasn't just the culture, it was like a whole human race by itself that didn't belong white, black, whatever. It's just Jewish. And, her family weren't that religious, but they had the ceremonial Friday night dinners.
Yeah.
They'll do the Passover, bits and pieces of the religion, but they weren't deep
Yes.
religious. But she also did the kibbutz, she went on that 20 something, like 17, 18 journey of going on the kibbutz to find herself
Yeah.
and find, like you said, her own path. Okay, my parents are Jewish. My grandparents are Jewish. They're proudly
Yeah.
Jewish, but I'm this born and raised in England. I don't fully identify as Jewish, but because there's a religion and a way of living that's not going to be me. How can I carve my own path? And similarly, I had a bit of in my chapters where, okay, I want to know what life looks like when I live in Ghana full time. What does life look like when I'm not a minority? So I went back to
Ooh.
Ghana to be amongst my people. And Reena, the interesting thing? People didn't look at me as Ghanaian. Even though I
Ooh,
speak the language, but because I've
yes.
lived abroad for like 40 years, my accent gives me away that, hey, where are you from? You're not Ghanaian. Where are you from? I am Ghanaian. And then I'll switch to our local dialect so that they can see that, oh, she's fluent. But even in my fluency with the language, even the fact that I ate the food, even the fact that I look like them, I was never really accepted as fully Ghanaian. Also because my husband is Italian, my kids are mixed race, and I never felt the sense of belonging that I thought I'd feel when I go back home, when I go back to being not a minority. So that introduced me to that famous quote that says, I belong everywhere and nowhere, but I belong to myself.
That's so beautiful. I absolutely love that. I'm going to edit that little bit out, that cough there, but there was a similar quote that I like to say, and it was, I was once beautiful and now I am myself.
Mm.
I spent so many years of, yeah, like wanting to be skinnier, wanting to be prettier, wanting to perform better, wanting to be what everyone else wanted me to be. And it's such a journey of just being happy with who you are right now.
Yeah. So that leads me to who is Reena right now and what does happiness mean to you?
That's so good. I will say I have been very much exploring my creative talents, and that so much lights me up. That's who I was as a little girl. Like, I used to love to put on performances for my grandparents and my parents. And through podcasting, I have connected with musicians and artists and creatives. And I definitely think that that is a piece of who I am. So this one podcaster, Bruce Chamoff, he's the CEO of the World Podcast Network. He's got like 1,000+ podcasts on his network. He is also a musician for like a good chunk of his life. And he was like, yeah, I collaborate with people all the time. I was like, hey, if you're ever looking for somebody to like sing a hook or like sing backup, let me know. And then I ended up collaborating with him on 2 songs.
Oh,
And then there was this other guy from Fun Fact Friday, David Meadus. He does a scripted podcast. And I listen to some scripted podcasts. I actually produce a scripted show. I was like, oh, I wonder if I could actually do that. Like, I've worked with voiceover artists and, on Nanny 911, I did the circle takes and all of the post production with the nannies. I was like, let me try that. And so there's an episode of me being an angry newscaster getting ready to air. One sec.
brilliant fun.
Yeah, so I would say like who I am right now, first and foremost, I'm a mom. I have 4 children. My oldest is
Four
almost
children. I didn't know
16.
that. What are the
Yes.
sex? Are they boys, girls?
I have 3 boys, 1 girl.
Mother of 3 boys. Wow. Kudos to you. I
Thank
salute
you.
you. I've got one son and his work. 3 of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, that is a big part of who I am now. I'm always thinking about them and always trying to juggle both, my profession and parenthood. And what does that look like? Can you still have both? Um, I just did a podcast about that actually. It is such a constant juggle. And also, like, in the beginning, I really feel like I lost myself in parenthood because even though I had watched like 3 seasons of Nanny 911 and worked as a post production supervisor on thousands of hours of footage of how to raise children, when you have your own,
Different.
they all meet their milestones at different times, and no book will prepare you for parenting whatsoever.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so wow. First of all, I want to honor you for where you are right now. I really feel like we're all born to create. Whatever our creative mission, whatever our path, it's so nice that uh you have embraced this season. There's been parts of you that was raising 4 children, and that's complex. We'll come back to the conversation about motherhood, but you make time to be creative because, as we spoke about earlier, your creativity really matters. And I'm lucky that you say yes to your creativity with your podcast and the things that you're doing. Yesterday, I did a live, and I was fortunate for you to be present, and you're talking about Singing. I always wish I had a singing voice. I admire singers so much because music does something for me. You know, it completely can support whatever energy I'm trying to shift in my body or anchor in. I love music so much. I was raised by a lot of Christians and I go to church, and I love that. My favorite part of church is the praise and worship. When you go to a good church, my judgment for a good church is the praise and worship, because it can completely elevate you to receive messages in a different way. So I love that in you. But tell me what you've learned about motherhood and the question you asked about, can a mother have it all? The children, the person, and that job is not just children. It is, you have a massive responsibility of raising the next generation, imparting values, attitudes, opinion. The first 18 years, we are the person downloading into them, you know, and modeling for them what life looks like, whether in marriage, in motherhood, in parenting, in career, in creativity. How are you finding it all?
That's a great question. Oh my gosh. How am I finding it all? Well, I will say, I'm going to relate this back to reality TV. It does not matter what somebody is like on the phone, how many hours you prepare them in the green room. Ultimately, all of the love and the lessons and what you pour into them, they are still going to be who they are. And they're still going to go out on that stage and perform however they want. Hopefully, you've modeled good things, but sometimes kids will surprise you with they have their own ideas. And you know what? My dad really let me have my own ideas, maybe sometimes to a fault, because I definitely took a lot of risks. And I always knew that I could call him at any hour if I needed a bailout. And I think that I have been kind of trying that approach. I'm a little bit more protective because of some of the situations I got myself into that I don't know if they were the best. And I don't want my kids to, no one wants their kids to suffer unnecessarily. Like, for instance, I had a daughter who switched schools, a year and a half ago because we moved from Chicago to Houston. And it was an adjustment. It was hard for all of my kids, like four new schools, and they're all going to adjust differently. And she was going through a day where she had gotten into it with a couple girls in school, and she texted me and was like, "I need Starbucks." I'm like, not every parent would do that.
Yeah.
Not every parent would run to their kid's rescue. I can't, my parents didn't have the luxury of doing that, but I've done that multiple times for my daughter. You know, if the pandemic taught me anything, is that, like, honestly, being there from 7:30 to 4 really doesn't matter. I'm okay. Like, even today, the kids had a dress up day at school where they could dress like their teachers. And my daughter was like literally like making a beard on her face with like eyeliner. And she had a friend spend the night last night, and they were getting ready too long this morning. They were both late. And they were having so much fun, like mocking their teachers and getting ready to go dress up like their teachers. I let them make a grand entrance. I let them show up late and be creative and have the time of their life decorating themselves this morning and last night till ungodly hours. Um,
To show the teachers how it's supposed to be done.
yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah, parenting comes with unconditional love
Mm.
and also loosening up, I think, on some of your boundaries and expectations.
Yeah. Oh, you're speaking right to my heart. So I have a 17-year-old son, and I have an 11-year-old daughter.
Cute.
Like your daughter, I'm the only girl out of six siblings of brothers. So I know what it is to be the only female amongst boys and trying to find your way. I was actually a middle child. What position is your daughter in?
Yeah, she's number two. She's
Yeah.
got a
Okay.
brother over her and two under.
All right.
Nice.
And I feel for her, but I admire the friendship that she has with you and the trust that you've built, that whatever's going on in the outside world, she can always come to you, because I couldn't always go to my mom in the way that she was going through stuff as well. My parents had a very turbulent relationship, and sometimes I didn't want to trouble her with whatever challenges I was having at school or in my time. So I try to solve everything. So I love that you have that bond with your daughter. And then you're so right. Parenting is a bumpy road, right?
Woo.
Of course, you show up with all the tools and best knowledge and best practices that you can offer. But at the end of the day, that child takes the stage and they become who they're supposed to become or whoever they choose to become. That might take some of your wisdom, might not take some of your wisdom. Connecting on music, I love a song by Martina McBride that says, "In my daughter's eyes, I am a hero. Um, she thinks I'm brave and strong, but the truth remains is that she was born to rescue me."
Oh
Right?
my God. Wow. That just gave me the chills. That's so beautiful and powerful.
That is so good.
Yes.
She was born to rescue me. So my question for
Oh,
you is, what has been the rescue mission that you've taken from your children? Right? Because
the first thing that comes to mind is honestly, we have an unruly neighbor. We live in townhomes and they are very close. Like we went from having a house in Chicago with more space in between neighbors. And we have a neighbor that like literally lets her dog use the restroom in our yard every day. And she doesn't always pick it up right away.
oh,
And it
oh, so
very
number two as
much
well.
bothers me. But you know what? It doesn't bother my kids at all. It's amazing. It bothers me the most out of anyone in the house. And my daughter's like, sidestep it. You know what I mean? Like, and that actually was a huge lesson,
Hmm.
honestly. Stooping to that person's level is not going to get you anywhere. Having a screaming match isn't going to get you anywhere.
Hmm.
But sidestepping it and going about your day and, focusing on the good in your life is a much better path.
Yes.
My daughter literally was like, Mom, you're the only one that this is bothering. And I was like, damn, that's good wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Where focus goes, energy flows, right? So she's empowering you to focus on the good. So your daughter is in a family generation where there's quite a few of the generational females still around, the grandmother, mother, great grandmother. And every generation, I believe, puts together all the knowledge and wisdom, and the baton is handed on. What do you hope your daughter takes? Obviously, she's going to model it and make it her own. We're talking about letting our kids go and be themselves, right? What do you hope she takes from the generations of women that she's been lucky to meet in her time?
That is a great question. One thing that I do feel like my great grandmother and my grandmother on my mom's side were really good at is welcoming people into their homes.
Mm.
They were entertainers
Mm.
and they were very generous. Even my mom, I would say what she picked up from that was writing thank you notes
Yeah.
and visiting with the elderly.
Mhm. Oh, wow.
That that has been very important in my family. And actually, I have felt like in being able to take care of my grandmother, I do drag my kids on all of their spring breaks and Christmas breaks and all of these things to see my grandmother, who's truly like my dad, one of my best friends.
Mm.
I miss being able to talk to her for hours at a time. I am so glad that I've captured her story on audio as well.
Yes.
I hope that my children honor the elderly, and I hope that they welcome people from all walks of life into their home.
I love that, Reena. I love that. Um, my dad was a crazy man for how much he welcomed strangers into our home. To the
Wow.
when I was younger, I didn't appreciate it at all, Reena. I didn't appreciate it at all. My dad would be the type to go to the airport, drop somebody off, and come back with somebody else in his car. What happened? Oh, they missed their flight, and there isn't a connecting flight till tomorrow, and I couldn't leave them. And nobody speaks French. I'm the only one that speaks French, so I brought them home for the night. And when he passed away, the outpour of stories that I didn't even know when he was alive, of going beyond the greatest expectation of making strangers into family. And all those strangers to us came to pour out. I can't believe this man passed. He did so many acts of kindness that it was insane. So that really resonates with me, that you would want your children to be kind to them. Also, towards the end of my father and my father-in-law, my husband and I both share this belief about taking care of the elderly. It was our responsibility, and I didn't see it as a chore or something I didn't want to do. I enjoyed cooking for my dad, and when he left, I'll still see the items of shopping that my body wanted to pick up for dad, but he's not here anymore. And it was such a privilege to take care of the elderly. So, and I hope that the next generation, although our lives look very different, right? When they're not as close, when they move out, they don't seem as close to family. I hope my kids also retain that in them. So, Reena, I want to talk about your dad, because that's the thing that really appeals to me about our connection. We're connected in many beautiful ways, as I'm finding out. But I want to talk about your dad. So, if your dad was here right now, Reena, what do you think he's most proud of to be called Reena's dad?
That's such a great question. I think that he's proud of me for getting back up.
Mm.
That's something that he always encourages. He was like, if you lay down, people just step on you. He says stuff like that. Or, if you quit, then you'll never get better.
Yes.
And, one story that is one of my favorite stories is that I auditioned for a youth performing arts school for high school because I wanted to switch out of my home district school after being bullied in the middle school.
Yeah.
And I didn't read all the fine print of what you had to do to get into that school. I just went in there and sang a song off the radio. And then they're like, you need to sing in a foreign language. You need to be able to sight read music. Why don't you go take some voice lessons? And so, my dad saw how bad I wanted to go to school there. And he was like, let me talk to the head of the music department. Let's see if we can get you another audition and I'll pay for you some voice lessons and, some piano lessons and you can like learn how to read the music. But that really took swallowing my pride to walk back in there after being rejected. Like all of these other students who were admitted met the mark on the first go. They also read the instruction manual, but I went to voice lessons for 3 months straight and plucked out those piano keys and brought every piece of music for 4 years that teacher ended up giving me. I got into the school. I didn't quit. I saw it through, even though I wanted to quit every single day. And I was like, man, my dad went to bat for me here. I'm going to get back up. Even though I don't feel like the best singer, even though the people around me got in on the first try, even though the people around me sound, in my opinion, amazing, surrounding yourself by people who are amazing and better than you will elevate my game as well.
Wow, that's such a good lesson your dad taught you. It reminds me of the quote by Les Brown that says, when you get knocked down, make sure you fall on your back, because if you fall on your back, you can always get up. You have to land on your back from your back position. If you fall on your face, chances are you don't want to get back up again. So it's nice that you have your own superhero. My dad was my superhero, Reena. I loved him so much for my dad was a military man, first of all. He was in the Ghanaian military. And so he had military training. So he had that toughness, discipline, routine, structure, rituals. And when I was younger, I wanted the flexibility, anything goes, but these are gifts that actually has helped me and shaped me to become who I am, because he doesn't allow me too long to feel sorry for myself. He'll shake me off or point me in the right direction or point my focus or my attention in the right direction. And I think it's so important, particularly as an ambitious mother who's creative and doing so many things, to have a pillar. I realized that my dad was a pillar. I was propped up by this incredible pillar. So I love that you have a dad that does that for you. And here's what I learned about my dad. Although I call him my superhero, it's not till his passing, Reena, that because my dad didn't let his armor down too often. Does your dad allow you to see behind the strength and the composed structure? What's your dad like? Like, is he good at being vulnerable?
He is. And especially as he's aged, he's gotten more vulnerable. Like he'll cry in front of me. And,
Oh, good.
I actually have to pause and make sure that I ask him how he is doing too,
Mm.
because a lot of times as kids, we just want to talk about our day and our needs. And as you start to age, you realize that you need to ask about the other person just as much.
Yes, yes. I I asked my dad, but he was never willing to go into it because unfortunately he didn't want to let go of being my superhero. You know, we had
Mm.
all put him on such a pedestal and he had identified himself as this, larger than life Ashanti man. I'm from an Ashanti tribe. They're very proud. And I think maybe one time I saw my father cry, it really crushed me, but I loved it. I love seeing that human side
Ooh.
of him. And also when he passed, with all the pictures, going into his childhood pictures, it's almost like I got to know my dad all over again and taking off his army officer suits that we'd put on him and seeing the fragile, vulnerable boy that, did so many things with his life and saw the human side of him and I felt bad that I didn't allow him also to just be whoever he wanted to be. My dad made some choices that I didn't always support, and I regret that because, like we're talking about our children, there comes a phase in life where there's that crossover where we need to parent our children, parent our parents, right?
Yeah.
Like I find that my mum allows me to be her coach, her advisor, her mentor. It's not just take, like you're saying, you check in on how was your day, but I get to say, how does that make you feel? What do you think about that deeply? Not from her advice, but just seeing the innocence and a child in her and going to offer her a hug or, be her mummy and make her feel like she is carried and I can be her pillar. So I'm loving that crossover that happens from them being your caregiver and your superhero and propping you up to, if they live long enough, we have this opportunity to be their superhero.
I
Yeah.
feel like that happened for me through this project with my dad. It
Mm.
has really made us closer.
Yes.
Like we were a little bit talking about before this, I feel like it's kind of given him something to look forward to, given him something to think about, giving him something to evolve with.
Mm.
It's amazing. I'm in my early 40s. When you have a project in your early 40s with your parent where you guys can work on something professional together and creative together and something where you can elevate in a new way together. I mean, how many people actually do that with a parent? It's crazy.
And it's so rich to see the generations sat side by side together. So you have all your modernism and approach, and your dad comes with the old school wisdom. Tell your dad he has a raving fan in England. I love you,
Aw.
daddy.
Well, I'm going to share this episode with him and see what he has to say about it.
Oh, I love him so much. He's so smart. He's so biblical. Like, I just love him. His knowledge and wisdom will never date. His insights are always so useful. Listen, I learned a Jewish word that I absolutely love. And since you're Jewish, I'm going to show off my one Jewish word that I know, which I learned in church the other day, and it's called hesed. And
Yes.
it has a difficult translation in English because it means so many things. But the meaning that I'm using here is the unconditional love that our Father has for us. Obviously, we're talking about Heavenly Father. Um, what is your Hesed love for your dad? What is the unconditional bond between you and your biological father?
I love that question. When I think of the word chesed, I think of giving to others. And my dad has given me so much of his time. I mean, if you think about it, time is our most valuable thing.
Mm.
And literally, we have done over 350 episodes
No
together. That means
way.
he has listened to over 350 hours of me interviewing people
And commented.
and commented.
So he has to listen.
That is a lot of special time.
That's a
And
Hesed love.
honestly, that's huge chesed. That is a huge amount of giving. And it's a huge why for me now. It's a huge purpose for me now. People are like, what keeps you going with your podcast? I'm like, dude, I get special time with my dad. If nothing else, it's that.
Yes, that is richness. Time is our greatest and most precious commodity. And time also spent can never be replaced or brought back. But with the two of you, you get to invest time in each other, because it is what matters at the end of the day. We're just here to invest our time, right? You can make more money, you can make more travels and adventures, but you can't make more time. What we have is what we have. And the crazy thing about time, especially with our parents, is that we don't know when the exit would be. I literally thought my dad was such a strong, powerful, healthy man that he was going to live to super old. I got 82 years of time with him. It wasn't short, but it's never enough. So yeah, I love that you get to create and share and be vulnerable together. And your dad is that, modeling for the generations to come. There's no greater legacy than what he's doing with you right now. So
Thank
amazing.
you.
Reena, I feel like I could talk to you forever, but I want to be respectful of your time because I know that we've got to, you've got other things to get on with. But is there any passing words of love, inspiration, about motherhood, creativity, all the stuff that we've talked about, parenting? Is there any closing words that you want to share with people listening?
It's funny because when you were sharing some of the quotes that came to you, the one that came to me is the one from like Michelle Obama, where she's like, is it when they go low, you go high?
Yeah.
I love that.
Mm.
And my dad really and I have been talking about that a lot lately because one area where I like still need work is being more accepting and being less judgmental and taking a breath before I want to react. And I am proud of myself because I feel like it's an area in which I notice that and that I'm trying to make improvements there. But that quote stays with me. When
Okay,
when they go low, you go high. It's always better to take the high road. Always.
let's unpack that a bit more because I feel like that is a great quote, but it'll resonate with so many people in so many different ways. Can we just step into why it's so meaningful to you on examples that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, mainly it's with the neighbor who poops in my yard every single day. But also, even with bullies like in my life, like or even in television, there was this one episode where I had an unairable show. There was a girl who called the show and she was like, my boyfriend's family hates me. I've done nothing for them to hate me. And then she comes out, she tells her story. We care about her. We were like rooting for her. She's got this relationship where you're like, okay, that's beautiful. And then they come out and they're saying these things about her. And lo and behold, the moment they start yelling and screaming at her, she acts like what they're saying that she acts like.
Hmm.
So, by you dropping to people's level and you losing your composure and acting not how you want to act and humbling yourself, you got to check yourself there. You you're gonna lose the audience. You're gonna lose the sympathy. If you're the good guy, you got to stay the good guy. And chances are, this is another thing that I've learned again and again. If people are treating you badly, they treat other people badly. Let them jump to that conclusion on their own. You don't have to be the bad guy too. Stay the good guy.
Um, that's so beautiful. And sometimes, until you've done the kind of work that we get to do in our chosen profession, it's difficult to do. We're all able to be triggered, and sometimes when people treat you a certain way, if somebody loves on you, you laugh back. If somebody's laughing, you don't even know what they're laughing about. You laugh, you laugh
It's
back.
contagious.
It's
Yes.
contagious. So we can be reflections of other people's behavior, and I see how. But obviously, the ninja move, the next frontier with AI and technology and things that are the robotic part of humanity, robots are going to take over. But this is the next frontier where we all need to master, which is self-mastery, being in control of our own emotions, our thoughts, our reactions, our responses. I had a neighbor who was a dog trainer, right? So he lived in quite a small house next to mine. It's just a 2-bedroom house. And in the garden, he'll have like 20 dogs at the same time, like massive dogs. You know, Doberman, Alsatians, way too packed. I don't know how the council allowed him to have that. And Reena, he would have a bucket in the garden where they will poop, and he wouldn't dispose of it daily. He'll just let the bloody thing fill up until there were these giant flies in the summer that will come and sit on the poo. And I couldn't open my window because the dogs were either constantly barking, or the smell, or basically just the massive flies that will come into my house and all over my food. And I was a new mom, you know, I was dealing with postnatal, whatever issues, trying to get the whole balance between motherhood and my changes going on in myself. It was just too much. And you know what? I moved. No,
Yeah.
because it was driving me crazy. I moved. I didn't
Yeah.
sell the house. I took that as an opportunity to go have an adventure travel, and I moved somewhere for 6 years. And one day I came back to collect my post and see my tenants of the house. And he said, "Oh, Amma," he was actually Jewish, John. He said to me, "I'm so sorry. I must have forced you to move country." And I said, "John, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Your reason was to get me out of my comfort zone and go find an adventure in life, which was to travel and live abroad with young kids that I wanted to. But had you not done what you did, I would have been comfortable and I would have never moved. So thank you. I owe you thank you, because you opened a beautiful chapter in my life that I wouldn't have stepped into if you hadn't been piling that shit in the garden."
I love that.
I hope you find an empowering reason or meaning that these dogs are doing for you, because this is what happened for me. And Reena, when they go low, absolutely you go high. It's not easy, but we can do it one day
We
at
can
a
do
time.
it.
We can do it. I love this time we spent together. It's so nice to get to know you. Tell your dad hi from a fan in England. Say hello. And we should definitely continue this conversation another time. But thank you so much for saying yes to me. Thank you so much for your light. I feel it right here in England. And long may you continue this amazing journey you're on for yourself and with your dad.
Thank you for sharing your dad's story with me and your most precious gift of your time. Excellent interview. And I feel so close with you from this conversation. Amazing.
You're welcome. Take care, my friend.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. That was so good.
Okay, so I need to go to more and